How's it going, my RWBY friends? Welcome to my breakdown of Jaune Arc. This is going to be hype AF, extra thick status, epicness, and all that jazz. Yeah, so basically, if you're not familiar with my character breakdowns, these are rambly long videos where we go in depth over characters, their attributes, things like the history, the personality, weapons, semblance, fighting styles, relationships, and a little trivia at the end. That's how I'm going to break this down. I have a little bit of notes on the right-hand side. No script. You guys know how I am. Never really liking to use a script. I like to just kind of wing it and just kind of talk with you guys, keeping it real. So I do have an outline, but the rest of it's just going to be rambly. So yes, so this is the Jaune Arc character breakdown. I've put this series on standby for quite a while. I did the breakdown for RWBY, Yang, Weiss, Blake. Actually, I don't know if I ever did Yang, to be honest. I need to check if I did. I know I did Weiss, Blake, and RWBY, and I even did Ren. I might have skipped Yang and actually forgot about her, though, to be honest. But yeah, here's Jaune now. So I want to give a special shout out, though, to Jaune Arc himself. He is a sponsor on Patreon, a co-producer, and he does come to my live streams very often and donates. He's awesome. Jaune Arc is a great supporter of this channel. Shout out to you, Jaune. And here is the Jaune Arc character breakdown. So we're going to start out with history, starting with Jaune Arc's history. So there's not too much to talk about here, but there is a little bit of importance to note, and that is going to be, you know, his long line of warriors, the long line of warriors in this family. So we know his great-grandfather fought in the Great War, and that's how Jaune got his weapon, crochet more. So it was passed down throughout the family, and then Jaune, it's not really exactly told, like, they don't tell us if it was given to him. It's kind of implied, in my opinion, that Jaune kind of just took it. Like, maybe it was the kind of thing that they hang as a mantle over a fireplace. You have, like, the shield and the sword over there as, like, a relic kind of thing. Not like a RWBY relic, but you know what I mean? A relic for the family. Jaune kind of just takes it and dips. So I don't know, maybe his family gave it to him, but the way Jaune snuck into Beacon, it kind of makes me feel like he just kind of took it and did his own thing. We also know that his family has 7 sisters, so a long line of warriors in his family. Great-great-grandfather fought in the Great War. His family has 7 sisters. I feel like he's part of a pretty big family. Maybe it's a kind of a famous family too, the Arc family. You know, that's a strong-sounding name. I wouldn't be surprised if his family's kind of well-known somewhat. And there, you know, a lot of people do kind of theorize that Ozpin may have known his great-great-grandfather because he fought in the Great War, and we know that Ozpin is the King of Vale. It wouldn't be too far-fetched if they knew each other, but at the same time, it wouldn't be too far-fetched if they didn't, because in a war, there's a lot of soldiers. Maybe Jaune's great-great-grandfather was just one of the soldiers, and Ozpin never actually, like, met him or anything. That's also possible. But that's about it for his history. That's about all we know. So it's like, we don't know much about Jaune's history, but what we do know is pretty dang important. So that's why we covered that section. And now we'll move on to Jaune's personality. So Jaune's personality did take a big shift after the fall of Beacon, but before the fall of Beacon, that's what we'll get into, and then we'll discuss after fall of Beacon. So here is pre-fall of Beacon. So he always seemed to have wanted to become a hero. He wants to, like, live up to his ancestors' name and whatnot, which is interesting because he didn't go to primary school. He just skipped and, like, went right into Beacon, forced his transcripts to go right into Beacon, which is a big problem for him that recurs throughout the show, and that problem is specifically his lack of training. And also his weapon, to be honest. He took crochet Moors and then forged transcripts to get into Beacon. Now, Beacon is a prestigious school, so it's not really bad for him to do that, to be honest. He hustled his way in there, which is respectable in a way. However, I don't understand why he didn't go to Signal Academy first, which is what most people, you know, every main school has a primary school, except Vacuo's a little weird about that, but, well, that's not a Vacuo video. So yeah, in general, people go for Vale, or sorry, for Beacon Academy in Vale, people normally go to Signal Academy, which is located on Patch. Then they're there for a few years. What they do is they learn, like, basic combat things. They make their weapon. Maybe they learn a little bit about aura control. Maybe even they learn a little bit about their semblance. And then they go to Beacon and actually get, like, the full-on huntsman training, where they, you know, get more weapon skills, but they're not building the weapon. They have a weapon now, but they're fine-tuning their weapon skills. They do some, like, you know, little missions where they shadow huntsmen, like, out in the field, more combat applicable stuff rather than just, like, training. So yeah, Jaune just skipped right to that, which is probably not a good idea. It's actually for sure not a good idea. He should have went to Signal. He should have got that, like, technical skills and made his own weapon, which is interesting because we'll get into the weapon segment after this. But really quick, I'm going to repeat myself in that segment probably because, well, in a brief way, because it is important to note that since he didn't go to primary school, he didn't actually make his own weapon. He has crochet Moors, but we'll get into that more in the weapon segment, like I said. All right, so he starts as a kind of goofy and outgoing character in the Follow Beacon. I mean, before the Follow Beacon. And then after the Follow Beacon, he's much more serious. And he seems to be in this constant state of like grieving and angst. We see him like training to peer his tape. So he wants to train and get stronger. And now my dog's getting up. I'm looking at my dog. Crank, you okay? You good? Crank, you good? You good, buddy? You good? You good? All right, I think he's good. I hope he's good. Sorry about that. Then we'll go out after the video. Hold on. So yeah. Sorry, I kind of lost my place a little bit. Like I said, these are rambly videos. Anyways, yeah. Yeah. So he's goofy and outgoing before the Follow Beacon, and we did see even like before the Follow Beacon, even he was serious at times. For example, the dancing scene with Neptune. Like Jaune was so taken back by the fact that Neptune didn't actually accept Weiss's offer to go to the dance with him just because Neptune couldn't dance. So he was like calling Neptune out on that. He was like, you can't just like ruin a girl's entire night because you're embarrassed to dance because you don't know how to dance. So then Jaune, ended up, well, that's a good example of him getting serious in a way, even before the Follow Beacon. So he could get serious at times. But then after the Follow Beacon, like I said, is when we get that major character shift, when he's like serious all the time. And it seems like he's in grieving and angsty. Like he, has angst towards Crow and Ozpin and all those people, Ozluminati and whatnot. So yeah, but we do see him snap it sometimes. For example, when he's fighting Cinder, he literally can't grasp Cinder's mindset of being like cold and evil and willing to hurt people. It's like Jaune is so pure of heart and just wants to help people that it just makes him mad to be in the same room as someone like Cinder, who's so opposite of him. So it's kind of cool in a way that he's like that, to be honest. It's kind of cool. So overall, he's also like a tactical and good leader. He understands the strengths of the people on his team. For example, in Juniper, he understood like what Ren's good at. For example, using Ren as a distraction because Ren's fast. Using Nora as like the damage dealer. Using Pyrrha as kind of like the utility. Granted, Pyrrha, if she used her semblance differently, she would be able to just like annihilate anybody almost for the most part in a way. But that's, knowing Pyrrha in character, she's not like that. So Jaune used her like in Juniper versus Bronze as kind of like utility, like, helping shield Nora when need be, helping attack when need be, just kind of, all around functional. But Jaune's a good leader. He's tactical. He understands the strengths and weaknesses of those on his team. It's good. It makes it work. Moving on to the weapon segment of this video now. So Jaune's weapon, Crochet Moors. Like I said, we were going to get into this more in this part of the video regarding the fact that he didn't make his own weapon. So that's a pretty big liability. Hunters go to primary school, as I said, to make their weapon, amongst other things, to get like basic combat training too. But Jaune didn't do that. So like RWBY, she has the scythe, the sniper. It fits her fighting style very well. Yes, Crescent Rose has its flaws, but for RWBY, she makes it work really well. Jaune doesn't have that benefit. He did not make a weapon that suits him. He just got Crochet Moors and he's trying to make that work. So it's different. It's a lot different and it's more of a liability for him. Now that said, looking at it from a plot perspective, there's a reason why Rooster Teeth and CRWBY, CRWBY like gave him that weapon, Crochet Moors. I'm sure they'll make it work for him because it's plot. But if RWBY wasn't like a story, like if it was real life, like that's what he did, it wouldn't be a good idea. It's better for him to make a weapon that fits him better in the RWBYverse than just like taking a weapon that his great-great-grandfather used during a war that was kind of just sitting around. But as a plot point, it works. Real applicable, like real application, real life application, or a real RWBY application, probably not the best idea, but we'll see. So what is Crochet Moors? Well, I'm sure you know, but why not go into detail? It is a aiming sword with a heater shield, and as of Volume 4, he upgraded it with Pyrrha's metal from Milo and Ikuo, Pyrrha's weapon, to kind of coat it and make it more powerful, and also give it the ability to combine with the shield to make it into like a great sword. And on the edge of the great sword is Pyrrha's, Milo, and Ikuo's metal, Miko, Milo, Ikuo, metal, you know what I mean? Metal, making it stronger, more powerful. And indeed it really is, because in the Knuckle Lave fight, for example, we see Jaune strike it a few times. It's not doing anything. Eventually he gets that great sword boost and then slashes Knuckle Lave, and it actually hurts it. So it does actually increase the damage output. Of course, then he can't use his shield. So there's a trade-off. Like almost anything in life, there is a trade-off. And continuing on, that's about it for Crochet Moors. So again, it's passed down from his great-great-grandfather, used it in a war, was probably sitting around for a while. It's a not really the most versatile weapon. There's no range aspects of it, but ranged weapons in RWBY kind of suck anyways. Like guns don't really do anything. So it's cool. It's, it's good for him. Moving on to his semblance. So here's an interesting part of the video. Jaune's semblance is finally revealed. So in a way, it worked out that I put this video, this Jaune character breakdown off for so long, because now that we actually know what his semblance is, we can talk about that in the breakdown. Like in RWBY's character breakdown, I talked about her semblance. Weiss, I talked about her semblance. Every character breakdown, I go through everything in detail. So the fact that we know what Jaune's semblance is exactly, it works out. So Jaune's semblance is aura amplification. I made a whole video on this semblance. Maybe you want to check that out down below. But I'm going to go over everything in this video anyways. But, you know, if you want a more TLDR version, check out that like 4-minute video link down below of Jaune's semblance. But here's all you need to know about his aura amplification anyways. Before we get into that, though, a quick sip of coffee. One more. Okay, so, whoa, I almost hit my keyboard and like turned off my recording. That would have been really bad, but it didn't happen. It didn't happen. We're good. So Jaune's semblance aura amplification allows him to, well, amplify someone else's aura. This also works because Jaune, as Pierre told us, has an immense amount of aura. So his semblance, as we saw with Weiss, boosts someone's aura, amplifies their aura, which allows them to heal themselves, because aura is used to heal minor wounds. But when a character is under the effect of Jaune's aura amplification, it allows that person's aura to not only heal minor wounds, but to heal near fatal wounds as well. Not just that, but when you have a boosted aura, you can use it for things like your semblance. Almost every character in the show is using their aura to feel their semblance. So if your aura is boosted by Jaune's aura amplification semblance, then you can use your semblance in a greater way as well. So directly, Jaune is boosting someone's semblance directly, Jaune is boosting someone's aura with his semblance, and indirectly, Jaune is also boosting their semblance with his semblance. This gives him a very nice niche as a utility / support character in a team. But it also has a benefit to him as well. Like I said, Jaune has an immense amount of aura. It's unusual. The amount of aura he has is unusual. So perhaps Jaune is also in a state of permanent amplified aura from his own semblance. Perhaps his semblance is magnifying, amplifying his aura all the time. And that's why he has such a great amount of aura. Because aura is tied to one's soul, semblance is tied to aura. It could kind of work like that. It makes sense in my opinion. I think that'd be pretty cool. Like most characters don't have their semblance affecting them at all times. Crow's kind of like that. I mean, it doesn't affect him, but it affects those around him at all times. It just spikes up at random times, and he can use his semblance to make it like act up more. He can kind of manipulate in that extent. Jaune would be kind of similar. Like he's always under the effects of his semblance, more direct than Crow even. He's always got that boosted aura, no matter what, almost. It's interesting what would happen if he runs out of aura, though. That would be interesting. But we've never seen it happen. He's got so much aura, even though he doesn't do so well in fights. I mean, don't get me wrong. He's good at, you know, he's a good tactician. And my lighting just got weird. I think the sun just went behind a cloud. Sorry about that. But you know what I mean. Okay, so, yeah, his semblance. It's pretty sick. It could also potentially boost other people's semblances, like I said. For example, Weiss summoned the Queen Lancer finally after she was boosted by Jaune's aura amplification. Before that, she had never summoned it, even though she had it since Chapter 2. Volume 5, Chapter 2, Weiss had the Queen Lancer. Never summoned it until under the effects of Jaune's semblance. Even during the Haven fight, she went to summon the armored freaking, what's it called? It's like a Geist Grim, technically, but you know what I mean. She went to summon the Knight 3 times. Never tried to summon the Hornet, the Queen Lancer, until under the effects of Jaune's aura amplification. So I think there's definitely a correlation there. Moving on to the next chapter of this character breakdown, we're going to be talking about Jaune's fighting style. So Jaune is actually a pretty tactical fighter, but he's not very level-headed. That's his problem. It's a recurring theme with him, actually. He lets emotions get the best of him far too many times. He's unfortunately rather underpowered, even though he has noticeable improvements after his training. For example, after Volume 4, you know, after the events of Follow Beacon, we know that he's training at night. The rest of his party is sleeping, and he's out there training. Now, this is probably partially because he wants to see that tape of Pyrrha, and it makes him connect with her again. And, you know, he's grieving, he's mourning, so that's why he does this. But also, he does just want to get stronger, so he's training. So he's putting in the work, and we do see a noticeable improvement. But even with that improvement, he's still not a very good fighter, unfortunately. And again, that's reflected because he never went to primary school, and also maybe because Crochet Moors isn't the best weapon for him. Again, due to plot, it probably is. But on a technical level, it probably isn't. So he's got that working against him. His fighting style, he's a melee fighter with no range capabilities that we've seen. He's more of a leader / tactician. slash support role at the moment, but maybe as his aura amplification semblance grows, it will allow him to take more of a direct role in combat. For example, if he takes it, he could be like a tank. Like, he doesn't have to be a support character. He's got a great amount of aura, and with his semblance, again, if he can use it on himself, or if he is always in a state of aura amplification due to his semblance to himself, he could take a direct role in combat and just be taking the hits and being a tactician and support character. Like, he doesn't need to be in the back. Like, he doesn't need to be, like, all the way in the back of the party telling them what to do. He could be the tank telling them what to do. That would be pretty cool. I would like to see that for Jaune, and I think it would fit his character development very well for him to take an upfront role like that. But we will wait and see how that plays out. And that's really it for his fighting style. Like, he's not exactly defensive, even though he uses a shield. And as I said, he's got this recurring theme of losing his cool and then losing fights. We're going to get into like a breakdown of his fights right now, though. So just keep that in mind as we move on to the next section of this character breakdown, the fights. Jaune's fights. So I may miss a few. I apologize in advance if I do. I've got a list of the fights that he's been in off the top of my head, and I think this is all of them, but if I do miss some, I apologize. We don't need to cover every single one of them. This is just like things to note anyways. So Jaune versus Cardin, way back in the Jaune Arc. Jaune was kind of losing right when we first started that fight because we saw Jaune tired and Cardin was like fine. He was like chilling. And then Jaune gets extra aggressive, goes for a very obvious attack, super telegraphed, winds the sword back all the way. Cardin knows exactly what Jaune's going to do. Jaune gets reckless because he's low on aura, and even Glinda calls him out on this. Glinda says, like, you know, Jaune, you should pay attention to your aura because there's times in a fight when it's better to be defensive and not offensive. And here Jaune was using a shield and a sword, a pretty defensive set with low aura, and instead of like playing defensively and smart, he lets emotions get the best of him. He rushes Cardin with a really telegraphed attack and loses the fight. Again, it was like a sparring match, but still, he lost the fight and he let emotions get the better of him. That's what we really need to take note of here because it's a recurring theme in his fights. Next fight, the food fight. Food fight is kind of iffy, like debatable whether you really want to count everything from that or not, but we're not going to get into that. We're just going to like talk about it for a second. So the food fight, Jaune is in the food fight and gets KO'd within the first 30 seconds, and that's it. That's it. He gets hit by Yang's turkey attack, and he's out of the fight until the very end when RWBY destroys Team Juniper with their semblance. So yeah, that looks pretty bad for Jaune. He literally got like one shot by Yang within the first 30 seconds of that fight against the food fight, so the merit there is kind of up to the viewer to decide on. Flash forward to Volume 3, Juniper vs. Bronze. Jaune didn't do much in that fight at all, to be honest. In terms of him physically doing things, there was almost nothing that he did. However, due to his tactics, he basically won the fight for Team Juniper. That said, it was really Nora that like one-shot the whole enemy team, but it's because of Jaune's tactics allowed Nora to get the electric boost for his semblance. Jaune's tactics allowed Pyrrha to block Nora from getting hit by the enemy team sniper. Jaune wanted to finish off with team attacks, which maybe would have worked, but, you know, his team didn't really understand what was going on. So that could look bad as a leadership role, like he didn't explain it well enough. But since it's comedic relief, I'm going to give him a pass on that. It was just like a comedy scene, so whatever. And then Jaune tells Nora to finish them off, and she does. So I'm gonna all in all, I'll count Juniper versus Bronze as a good win for Jaune. Makes him look really good as a leader and as a tactician because, as I said, the way he like had his team counter the enemy team's attacks, advances, predicted the sniper shot and whatnot. Those leadership decisions, those tactical decisions were really good and led for Juniper to win that fight. Juniper versus the Deathstalker. Again, this was like. I'm repeating myself because it's important, man. Like, you need to take note of these recurring themes with Jaune's fights. In the Juniper vs. Deathstalker fight, again, he didn't really do well physically. At first, he was right up there with Pyrrha. He blocked the Deathstalker's attack, blocked it with the shield pretty easily. But then, Nora followed up with some of her weapon explosions, her grenade launcher explosions. After Jaune blocked the Deathstalker hit, Pyrrha's fine, but that explosion made Jaune, like, fall over. So he wasn't that balanced. He did block the Deathstalker, but right after, fell backwards because of Nora. So his stats, again, looking like on the low end for Team Juniper. But in the end, Juniper beat the Deathstalker because of Jaune's tactics. So again, we see him as a good leader, a good tactician. Ranger versus the Geist. Same exact thing happens again, except this time Jaune doesn't do well in the fight because he has no weapon at all. He is literally the tactician this time. He's got no weapon or shield. It is being fixed by the Blacksmith, Volume 4, Chapter 1. However, Jaune's leadership gets them to win the fight. He tells Nora to like use her new power-up, the charging the weapon with electricity, gets RWBY to use her semblance, pull Nora in, go for a team attack, knocks out the guy Scrim because of Jaune's tactics. I'm not saying that Ranger wouldn't have beat the guys without Jaune, but, you know, this is the way it is. Jaune closed out the fight with his tactics. Maybe it could have gone a different way, but this is what I'm analyzing because this is what happened. Okay, this is not like a hypothetical scenario thing. This is just breaking down the fights as they went down. You know what I mean? Okay, so Ranger versus Tyrion. Not the best fight for Jaune. I mean, I don't blame him here. He couldn't really do much as a leadership / tactical role because this fight was just so crazy and one-sided. Like, they were up against a maniac. So Jaune was a little bit taken back. The only thing noticeable that Jaune really did in that fight was block Tyrion's attack and hold him up over his head, which some people could say is a strength feat for Jaune, that he held Tyrion above him like easily without a sweat. But characters do a lot like more impressive stuff in strength in RWBY, so I'm not counting that as a really good feat for him, to be honest. Not when you have characters like punching through concrete and like ripping robots' heads off their bodies and stuff. So like, yeah, stopping cars in their tracks. Basically, I just referenced Pyrrha, Crow, Yang, and there's more and more references I could do, but that's not the point here. Ranger vs. Knuckleave, though, looks pretty good. But let's give Ren a quick shout-out. So in the Ranger vs. Tyrion fight, Ren was perceptive enough to like be the only one on the whole team to notice what Tyrion was up to. So that was a good showing for Ren. Moving on, though. Ranger vs. Knuckleave. So once again, recurring theme. I'm really driving that point home to you guys in this video because it's cool. When you're looking at Jaune's fights back-to-back like this, he really does have these recurring themes. So Ranger vs. Knuckleave fight. Jaune's not really putting in much work. We finally see the Great Sword modification in effect. Again, like I said, it puts in that damage on the Knuckleave, but it's not enough to seal the fight off. Not enough to really even swing the fight in their favor. It just does some damage. So it's really just to show the viewer, show us, that that upgrade does increase damage output. It's not just for show. But yeah, it doesn't do enough. What closes the fight out is Jaune's leadership. Also, Ren kind of getting more calm and collected because of Nora talking him into it and whatnot. But in the end, Jaune's plan is the one that gets them to chop the Knuckleave's arms off and eventually like destroy the head, decapitate it. You know what I mean? Oh, there goes my monetization. Son of a! I should have stopped at destroy the head. I should not have added the DECIPTA, whatever how you spell it, word. Too late now though. Rip. My monetization feels bad, man. Let's see. So yeah, that's Ranger vs. Knuckleave, and then finally the Haven fight. So again, I'm gonna say this. I'm driving this point home, guys. Recurring themes. Jaune, in the earlier fights, had issues with his emotions getting the best of him. That shows, again, it comes full circle in the Haven fight. He lets emotions get the best of him, and he goes after Cinder, a character who was toying with him, thankfully, because Cinder could have just killed him. Oh, there goes my monetization. If my monetization wasn't gone with the other thing I said, it's definitely gone now, but whatever. So, yeah, so he charges after Cinder, a character who could have one-shot him easily, and he fights horribly, extremely reckless. The same thing he did against Cardin, but even worse, because Cinder is actually dangerous. Cardin's not really. And this is a situation where it's not training. It's like real. Like Cinder could legitimately just destroy him and this entire team right there, all his friends. So yeah, Jaune gets reckless and gets absolutely tooled by Cinder. Gets Weiss impaled because of his words, not thinking before he talks. He also almost got destroyed. As we saw, the only thing that stopped him was Ruby's Silver Eyes going off for a second there and stopping Cinder. And he misses his attack because he's reckless. He had a chance to like attack Cinder when she was stunned. He got too reckless and overextended and excited, threw a bad attack at her and somehow missed that. Just a bad showing for Jaune in the Haven fight. But it's also a good showing in the way that it shows that his character is really, really well written. Because looking back on all I've said so far with these recurring themes, we do see that though Jaune has improved, he does have problems with letting his emotions get the best of him. He is so pure of heart that he does get so upset when he's up against people that are just like evil or mean. So he lets emotions get the best of him. He lets his, inexperience show at times when he gets really reckless. But if he would stay level-headed, he would be a really good tactician. He just needs to he needs to keep his emotions in place. And I'm sure he'll learn that as time goes on. So the next part of the character breakdown is going to be his relationships. And of course, if we're talking about relationships with Jaune, we're going to start with Pyrrha. Now, don't get the wrong idea. I'm not saying like shipping relationships. It's just all his relationships, whether it's friends or ships or whatever. So starting with Pyrrha. This is something I didn't like Jaune's character for a long time. And yeah, Jaune's character has grown on me a lot after Volume 4. As Volume 4 has gone on and Volume 5, he's grown on me a lot. But in Volume 1, 2, and 3, I did not like Jaune very much because I really didn't like how he treated Pyrrha. You have Pyrrha making it so obvious that she's into him. And really, basically, she would do anything for him. And he takes it for granted. He takes it for granted. And he doesn't appreciate Pyrrha until she is gone. And that is just a horrible, horrible thing. In my opinion, that's a life lesson that a lot of people could take to heart, including myself. I know I've in the past, I've taken things for granted, whether it's relationships or just opportunities. And you think that they're just going to be there forever, but they're not. You take it for granted. Time happens. Time's a thing. And these things end up ceasing to exist, or the opportunity is gone. The door is closed, and you regret that you didn't act sooner. So I dislike Jaune in a way because of how he treated Pyrrha, but also because I saw myself in him. Mistakes I've made in the past in real life is exactly what Jaune did to Pyrrha. And then you really don't realize it until it's too late. So I think that's part of why Arcos is my favorite ship in the show, or one of my favorite ships in the show. I also really like Renora because it's just so perfect. But Arcos is probably my favorite ship in the show because it didn't work. Because there is real life lessons in that ship. It's like, I think shipping is a fun thing. I think it's like, I don't take it very seriously. But I do take Arcos kind of seriously because of those life lessons. It's real stuff right there, man. It's real stuff. Though it's like fictional, real stuff in that whole ship. It's really sad. There's probably more to say about Pyrrha and Jaune, but now that I've talked about like the depressing stuff, that's kind of all my mind's going to right now. So I'm going to move on to Team Junior. Juniper, but we already talked about Pyrrha, so Junior. And if something else about Pyrrha comes to my mind, I will be sure to bring it up. So let's go with Jaune's relationship. Well, I guess Jaune and Jaune we wouldn't do, so I guess it wouldn't be Junior. It'd be more like Nora, and Ren, because we did Pyrrha. You can't do Jaune and Jaune. So Jaune and Nora haven't had much interaction. If anything, I think Nora is more aware of Jaune's mindset than Jaune is of Nora. Example, when Jaune and Pyrrha were outside the building and finally having some alone time together, and it looked like Jaune and Pyrrha were finally connecting because Pyrrha wanted to for so long and Jaune wasn't really. Jaune was finally kind of connecting with Pyrrha. This is volume 3, right before, the things that happened, the fall of Beacon. Nora and Ren come around the corner. Nora sees Jaune and Pyrrha sitting down together, and she's like, oh, you know what, Ren, let's go this way. Pulls him by the hand and like goes that way before they interrupt Pyrrha and Jaune's moment. So I think Nora is actually surprisingly aware of Jaune's mental state, and Nora's kind of a goofball, but she's smart. Like, it's kind of an act almost because of all the traumatic events that she went through. It's like almost a shell, but not entirely a shell. That's why I say almost, because that is her personality. Like, she is just naturally kind of goofy and energetic and whatnot, but sometimes it's emphasized because of that sad history that she has that she's trying to move on from. So yeah, that definitely is displayed in that scene because we do know Nora is like, she's smart, man. She's smart about this kind of stuff. And she's been in a relationship for a long time, depending on how long you think Ren and Nora's been a thing. And there's some people who still don't think it's a thing, but we're not going to get into that. Going into the relationship with Jaune and Ren. So we know Jaune literally considers Ren like a brother. They are close, and it actually looks really good on Jaune, again, as a leader, but also as a friend. Because as I said earlier in the breakdown, from the leader perspective, he is able to identify the other characters on his team regarding their strengths and weaknesses, things that they should do in combat, things that they shouldn't do because if it's a weakness. So he's good tactical. He's good. And I'm bringing that up again now because he had an idea of why Ren didn't want to go to CRWBY. So it was showing that he does know a bit about Ren. He was thinking like, he was putting the lines together, right? Connecting the dots. So that's good. That's good. And then going on Team RWBY. So RWBY and Jaune, depending who you ask, you could have answers ranging from, oh, they talk a little bit here and there, to, oh, they're going to straight up date. They're basically dating. So, a lot of people like Lancaster. I'm personally not a fan of Lancaster. What we do know for sure, though, it's not really debatable, is that RWBY considers Jaune one of her best friends. And RWBY has even said that Jaune is really like the first friend that she had at Beacon. Yang isn't really considered because they already knew each other and they're like sisters. But the first like friend besides Yang that RWBY had at Beacon was actually Jaune. It wasn't Weiss. It wasn't Blake. It wasn't Yang because, like I said, they already knew each other and they were sisters. But it was Jaune. It was Jaune. So Jaune and RWBY do have this really good relationship as friends, as like best friends even. And RWBY definitely thinks of Jaune as a best friend. I think Jaune thinks of RWBY as a best friend. But that's a big thing. We know RWBY thinks that. We don't really know if Jaune thinks that because he's never said it canonly. It's never really been brought up in Q&As or director's commentaries. But I think it's reasonable to assume that Jaune would consider RWBY one of her best friends for similar reasons why RWBY does to him. At least I hope Jaune does. So Personally, I'm not a fan of Lancaster because I do see the potential as them just like growing through these times, getting old together as like best friends that stay in touch. That's what I really hope happens to Jaune and RWBY. Yes, okay. Jaune and Weiss. We know Jaune was kind of crushing on Weiss earlier in the show. Weiss never really seemed to be into Jaune though. Seems like that kind of faded, but the shipping vibes kind of gets brought back around in Volume 5 when Jaune's healing Weiss. To me, I didn't really see it too much as a shipping vibe, but some of the people I talked to did. So, you know, to each their own. But I don't want to make this all about shipping. It's just that Weiss and Jaune's relationship has been more of a like kind of shipping, you know, one-sided shipping relationship. They haven't really talked that much. They just had that interest. So again, not really a shipping section, but if we're talking about Jaune and Weiss, it kind of has to be a little bit of a shipping section. Jaune and Blake. Maybe I'm just bad at what I'm doing. I'm bad at my job of reviewing anime characters, but I can't even really think of when Jaune and Blake has ever talked, to be honest. Maybe I should have reviewed that a little bit before this video, but I like to wing it, as you guys know, and I'm drawing a blank, man. When have Jaune and Blake really ever talked? I don't even know, man. I don't even know. So I'm moving right on from that. Jaune and Yang, kind of similar. There was that like joke in Chibi with Yang showing Jaune how to be like a Yang man. But in RWBY, they haven't really interacted that much. Even at Haven, Yang and Jaune just don't really interact that much. So that's kind of unfortunate. Maybe down the road we'll see that. The next most important relationship for Jaune seems to be his relationship with like Crow and Ozpin and the Ozluminati. Excuse me. The coffee has a way of coming back up when I'm talking really fast and a lot. Like in this video, talking for 31 minutes straight. I probably said like 50 billion words already. Anyways. So Jaune has that resentment towards Crow. Example, the campfire scene. I feel bad for Crow. He's, you know, Crow's clearly depressed when he's talking about his semblance. He's like super down on himself, super sad, like taking the stick and twiddling in the fire, all depressed, like all sad. And Jaune's like, wow, aren't you just a real bundle of joy or something like that? Or he's like, it's great to have you around, like totally sarcastic. Jaune doesn't really like Crow that much. He really doesn't. It seems like he has a lot of resentment towards Crow over Pyrrha, but deep down inside, I get the feeling that Jaune knows it's not really Crow's fault. And he has that resentment more towards himself. Like he wishes he could have done more. But since he couldn't, he kind of puts the blame on Crow and Ozpin. Maybe he knows he shouldn't really blame Crow for it. If anything, it probably is Ozpin's fault more what happened. Not really Crow's fault. But he's kind of associating them together, you know. So that's why it's like that. But then again, when Crow is injured, Jaune's the one to take him away and save him from the Knuckle Ave. So it's like Jaune has that resentment, but again, reflecting back to the personality segment of this video, Jaune's personality is so pure, and he just wants to help people, that even though he has some resentment towards Crow, he still wasn't about to let Crow get slain by the Knuckle Ave. Now, part of that may be because of his relationship with RWBY. He knows how much RWBY cares about Crow. There's no way he was going to let Crow get hurt, and then, you know, that would hurt RWBY. RWBY would be devastated. She would be... Dude, she would be so depressed if something happened to Crow. After all the loss she's had and trying to stay positive over it, if something happened to Crow too, bro, it would have been... RWBY would maybe not be RWBY. Like, the RWBY we know may be gone forever. So, Jaune probably saved Crow for 2 reasons. Because deep down, he knows it's not really Crow's fault, and Crow is an ally. He is an ally, to, you know, against the Salem fight and whatnot, against the Grimm. So, he would save him. But also because of what might happen to RWBY if something happened to Crow. So, I think those 2 reasons are why he did that. And then Jaune's relationship with his family. This is not something that we really, like, know for sure. We just speculate based on the information we know. We know he has 7 sisters. His family's pretty big. You know, maybe some of those sisters are older and even have kids. But he's been away from them for so long. He went to Beacon. He traveled to Haven. He's going to Atlas. Is he keeping in touch with his family? The cross-continental transit system is down. So I don't think they're even really keeping in touch. So I wonder if he's even on good terms with his family. I don't know. We know, like, he learned how to dance because he grew up with 7 sisters, he said. So they probably, when they were younger, they got along well. But does Jaune get along well with his family now? I want to say yes. But I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't. Like, if he just kind of ran away at the same time. I don't know. It's interesting. So that's the last thing we can just speculate on is his family. And that's going to get near the end of the video now, guys. A little bit of trivia. There's not that much trivia for Jaune that I know of. Obviously, he's an allusion to Jaune of Arc, but like a, what's it called? Not a crossplay, or like a gender bent kind of. Like, you know, like all the characters on Juniper are gender bent versions of those references. He's also voiced by Miles Luna, the assistant director and writer of RWBY. You guys should know that, though. You guys know all about CRWBY and Miles and Kerry and all those important people. So, yeah, Miles voices Jaune. And actually in the Reddit AMA, Miles was talking about how it's really difficult for him to be a writer on the show and also like do the voicing for Jaune, because Jaune's an important character, and Miles even like said that he's hesitant to write Jaune's character out sometimes because he has to like play Jaune. So it puts him in a really tough spot. And I can see how that'd be pretty tough. Jaune is the French word for yellow. Makes sense. And before Jaune's sword was modified, it was nearly identical to the statue of the man in front of Beacon. Could that be a correlation to Jaune's great-great-grandfather? If so, that means that Ozpin probably was actually pretty close to him. And that could kind of make sense because Oz did make Jaune a team leader, and he didn't say anything about Jaune getting into Beacon with fake transcripts. Now, Ozpin may not have known about it, but Ozpin's a pretty wise guy. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a correlation between all that. And that's really going to close out this video, guys. So thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't. I've got plenty of other content on anime and RWBY specifically. Literally over like 300 or 400 videos I have on RWBY. A lot of really cool theories and stuff. So I'm sure you'll enjoy that if you enjoyed this video. Consider joining us on our Discord server down below. One of the most active RWBY servers out there. So look at the description and join that if you haven't. It's open to the public. It's not private like some people have. Private Discords, they won't let anybody in except people that are paying the money. But I'm not like that. I'll let you guys all in. But if you do want to help support the channel, that would be awesome. I have a Patreon link down below. Take a look there. Some cool perks. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I've got this podcast I just started going weekly, episodic weekly podcasts. So if you like videos like this where I kind of just ramble, definitely consider becoming at least a journeyman hero on there. $2 a month. You'll get access to that podcast. And if you can't be a patron, well, it's all good because I still have plenty of RWBY content, almost daily RWBY content coming out anyways. So I got your back no matter what you can do for the channel, whether it's becoming a patron or just smashing that like button. Thank you for your support, and I'll continue doing my best to be your quality RWBY entertainer. That is the end of the video. Yeah, okay. Peace.